When we did our Week 9 preview, Dan, we called it Still Into You Saturday.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we're still into calling it Still Into You after we saw the influx of backups and the impact that they had in Week 9, after we saw the influx of survival games that we saw in Week 9. It was not a loaded week from the standpoint of there being monster upsets, major earth-shattering storylines for us to discuss on this episode that we're recording at midnight Eastern on Saturday. But in some way, shape, or form, as we come to know in college football, there are always interesting things to talk about, and we're going to go into those here over the next hour or so, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. What about sideline getting loose Saturday for the number of backup quarterbacks? Marcel Reed, Drew Pine. I think it was Brendan Rose for Utah after Isaac Wilson was benched. The number Beau Pribula, Penn State. The number of backup quarterbacks, either because the starter wasn't working out, Connor Wegman, Marcel Reed comes in, or there's an injury. Drew Aller, was it a knee situation for Drew Aller?
I think it was ankle. They said knee on the broadcast, but there's no way it would have been a knee if he's just standing there kind of willy-nilly on the sideline. So I'm going with ankle, my official diagnosis.
I think Baron Morton went down for Texas Tech. So sideline getting loose Saturday. It was a survival Saturday. There's a lot to talk about here. I'm doing great. I hope you're doing great. You're on little to no sleep, which... greatest show we've ever done, worst show we've ever done. You better stay tuned to find out.
We'll find out. Yeah, talk to us in about an hour or so. Thank you to one and all for downloading, for listening, for watching, for supporting. If you want to continue helping us on that journey, make sure you hit follow if you're new here. If you aren't, make sure you tell a friend. Leave us a review out on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a star rating wherever you can. All of that stuff really helps. Of course, bright and early tomorrow, the new Verballer Top 12 poll is going to go live. You can vote out at verballers.com if you're a certified or premium member out there. I don't know how much movement we're going to see as a result of the action in Week 9, but suffice to say, there was a fair amount of survival going on in and around the world of college football. Over the next hour or so, we're going to go through what we deem kind of the Big 12. The Big 12 things that transpired over the course of the weekend, which, of course, started a little bit earlier, as it has for the last couple weeks now. But we had games on Thursday and Friday, and, of course, Saturday that we need to get into here, Dan. I
assume Liberty won and Kyle McCord was super accurate. I don't need to go through it super closely. Yes? No?
You may want to hold off on that assumption.
Okay.
FYI. What was the big story for you after having watched everything in Week 12? What was the big story for you after having watched everything in Week 9?
Is it Week 12 already? Oh my God. I hit my head.
Top 12, Week 9,
Yes. Top 11 or 12 things, Week 9. I mean, the theme is survival, right? When you look across the sport, when you look at Ohio State, when you look at Texas, when you look at Kansas State surviving, I don't know, they made like a 91-yard field goal. I don't know what these numbers are getting cartoonish right now, but top teams, top 15, 20 teams, slow start for Penn State, losing a quarterback, they survive on the road in a tough environment. Like, it doesn't matter how good or average Wisconsin is week to week. That is a tough place to win. And what Penn State was able to do, it's survival. And so thematically, that's what it is. But when you look at those top few teams, especially Ohio State and Texas, I think those are the ones, especially because their opponents were probably somewhere between okay and pretty good. But these teams are built to not have to fully compete with Vanderbilt and Nebraska the way those teams are constructed at the moment, I think. But winning is better than losing. So I guess, I think the top clunker performances in a survival way were the story.
Well, I actually had the Marcel Reed performance.
He was
LSU.
The best reliever. I mean, it is World Series time. Yeah.
I had that as kind of my top thing, which we'll get into. I also had Penn State up at the top. But since you brought it up, why don't we talk about the Ohio State and Texas situation, because that was about as close as I think we got to actual upsets. Shout out to Roger Simon's father and Whoa a Blue Car.
Okay.
Those are two of our Verballers who are out and active out on college football Reddit, who were posting about this, and they said it best: when your clunkers, Dan.
Yes.
Win your clunkers. So Ohio State did win over Nebraska. Game was at home, 21-17. It was a bit of a nail biter.
Off a bye, yes, Ohio State?
Off a bye with Penn State on deck, which is to say, of course, that Nebraska had the ball with the chance to win late. They did not. Ohio State intercepts it, game over. But if you zoom out and look at what transpired in this game, it kind of had the hallmarks of rust.
Yes.
Hallmarks of rust. Ohio State 1 for 10 on third downs. They couldn't run the ball. Matt Rule in the postgame said he loved his defense, basically gave up 3 plays that he liked back, those being the 3 touchdowns from Will Howard. Who knows what happens if Ohio State doesn't get the stop when they got the stop, if in fact Nebraska's able to go down the field and score and win the game. But this is one of those deals where you're sort of looking and you're panning and you're seeing the scores kind of go across the bottom line and you wrinkle your brow. Really? Ohio State was a 25.5-point favorite coming into this one, Dan. Mm-hmm. They win by 4 at home.
So Ohio State down their starting left tackle for the season. Josh Simmons went down against Oregon, obviously not playing against Nebraska. They lose another tackle. They're shifting things all over on their offensive line. Will Howard looked like a Heisman caliber quarterback in this game. And Chip Kelly from the booth saw, oh man, Will Howard is nailing it, man. It's Carnell Tate, it's Jeremiah Smith. He looks comfortable. He looks accurate. He looks like he's dealing. What if we ran it a ton behind a beat-up offensive line? Far be it for me to question Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly has given me some incredible college football memories as an Oregon human. But this one seemed a little bit backwards. And I don't know if it were, RPO decisions, whatever it was. Chip Kelly is known for his ability to craft a sensational run game and run offense for a number of teams. Did it at Oregon, UCLA. Did it with the Eagles for a little while, if memory serves. Probably didn't do it for the 49ers.
Very little while, but yeah.
Yeah. Has incredible running backs at Ohio State. Doesn't necessarily have a consistently incredible running game, at least not recently, against defenses like Oregon's and Nebraska's. I kind of wonder why they weren't just airing it out a little bit more and leaning into what was working, especially after seeing what Curtis Rourke and Taven Jackson were able to do against the Nebraska secondary and pass defense last week. So that was curious to me. But Ohio State survived. Maybe they took some lessons from this, but it was an ugly win against, I still think Nebraska's defense is pretty good, pretty tough. I thought they game planned really nicely in terms of corralling the running game and forcing a lot of pressure on this offensive line on the ground. Unacceptable from my latex salesman playoff team of Ohio State.
Yeah, I saw the meme going around on social media, the two guys kind of arm wrestling. On one side, Penn State fans saying, will this be good enough against Ohio State? And on the other, it's Ohio State fans saying, will this be good enough against Penn State? Right. It was one of those weekends for sure in the Big Ten. So Ohio State does win. I take away from whatever you want, or take whatever you want away from that win. The other one that we should mention here at the top, if we are talking about survival, is the Texas game.
Yes.
So Texas goes to Vandy. Everybody at this point, the book is out on Vandy. The book's out on Diego Pavia. He's like a folk hero.
That he's good, that they're a good football team. Yeah.
Yes, they're good. They're a ranked football team. Diego Pavia is a bit of a giant killer, right? He has that reputation. And there were moments in this game where it didn't feel like, especially later in the game, it didn't feel like they were going to be able to conjure up that magic. And then lo and behold, they friggin' do it. Mm-hmm. They friggin' do it again. They find a way to score late. He somehow threads a needle to get the score late to 24-17 in favor of Texas. Eventually, they do get the ball back. They have an opportunity. At that point, though, it just wasn't happening. So it didn't happen for Vandy the way it did in that Bama game a few weeks back. But the fact that Texas goes into Vandy, the fact that they end up struggling like other teams have struggled was meaningful and definitely worthy of our discussion. What's interesting to me, though, is I kind of feel different about this one than I do the Ohio State one.
Okay. Why?
In this one, for sure, I felt like the story was Quinn Ewers.
I think so.
It wasn't so much Diego Pavia and the magic of Vanderbilt and their ability to take teams to the wire that we perceive as being better. This was Quinn Ewers actually stepping up at a really big spot. And given some of what he has gone through this season and the Georgia game, right? Like, there were rumors this past week maybe he's going to sit out. That was not a real rumor.
Man,
okay, but
I might go the other way. Continue.
I just thought that this is a pretty good performance by him, given everything that's transpired now over the last month and a half or so.
You can go in a couple of different directions with this. The offensive line struggled again and got pushed around. They got pushed around by Georgia, and Vanderbilt was able to find ways to pressure Quinn Ewers. I came away being impressed by some Quinn Ewers throws, but having the same concerns I think a lot of us have had these past couple years, where he seems to tighten up a little bit, and the quality that you would love to see. And look, he is a playoff quarterback. He helped to lead. He didn't play in every game last year, but he played in the playoff. He was the best quarterback on this team last season when they went to the 14 playoff. But there are just some moments where you're just like, man, if he really needs to win a game, if the run game isn't there, if the defense isn't there, and the defense has largely been there. The offense has just been putting the Texas defense in a bad position. And last week we saw it against Georgia, that the line was not able to weather the Georgia front. And Vanderbilt was able to get a bunch of pressure on Quinn Ewers, and he seems, for stretches, a little bit rattled to me. I don't know. I think he's good, but I think there are limitations to this offense right now. I think the skill talent is good, as beat up as this running back room still is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Texas is good. I don't think Texas fans should fully freak out. Like, football's hard. The SEC is hard. Going on the road to play a good team is hard. But I think the early part of Texas's season maybe mischaracterized this team as arriving once again without hiccups.
Yeah, I mean, to the point, though, on Quinn Ewers, I'm looking at this Texas rushing line right now.
Yeah.
And I see Quintravion Wisner with 17 carries, 79 yards with a long of 20.
Right.
I see Jaden Blue, 10 carries, 47 yards, a long of 23. With the exception of basically a couple big plays, Texas didn't run. And if they were going to win, this is going to be on Quinn Ewers in the defense. And so he had those 2 tip passes, and for sure there are moments where he does tighten up, but they needed him in this game. They escape 27-24 is your final. Texas moves on. They will probably remain a top 5 team. I don't know if I don't think they should fall as a result of this, but another thin win that transpires squaring off against Vanderbilt, which is one of the craziest stories we could have imagined this season.
I agree. And Vandy was right there. There was an onside kick, right, for Vandy to try and tie this game late. So that's where we were in this matchup. Texas was favored by how many points?
18.5 points, Dan.
18.5 points. No, the story to me is Vanderbilt's continued wave of quality against anybody and everybody they play, and Texas not fully adapting over the course of these games. It seemed like Texas was going to slow, like maybe a crockpot situation in this game. Vanderbilt just kept coming. And I don't know. At this point in the season, week 9, and I know Quinn Ewers has been beat up. He's still coming back physically. I don't know. I feel as if Texas, the pop that Texas showed early, is not necessarily showing itself in that same way as the schedule has gotten clearly more difficult.
Well, let's stay in the SEC then, and let's talk about Marcel Reed.
Please.
Marcel Reed is sort of the flag bearer this week for, is the backup better than the starter now? Is that where we're at? I don't think Marcel Reed is the passer that Connor Wigman is.
Or sometimes is.
Yeah. But there is no denying he gave them a pop.
Yes.
When he came in, he led a scoring drive, I should say, on all 5 of the second half possessions that he took part in. 4 of them were touchdowns. 1 was a field goal. And they brought him in at a moment in this game against LSU. They're at home. LSU seemingly had the best of their offense. They just could not crack this LSU defense, which in and of itself is kind of a story, given where LSU was at a year ago. They bring in Marcel Reed. Suddenly, it's like the floodgates open. LSU can't stop anything. Wasn't out there slinging it around. I think only threw 2 passes. Had 1 beautiful long throw.
Dude. That was a no, yes throw. Was it Noah Thomas who caught it up the middle, about 50 some odd yards?
Beautiful throw, just sort of like lurches back and guns it deep, hit him in stride. It was beautiful. But
Yes.
just the ability to bring him in for Mike Elko and offer something of a change of pace, the way it flipped the game and how quickly it flipped the game is really, really interesting to discuss here. If I'm a Texas A&M fan, I'm wondering now, what does the game plan look like moving forward? Because if you look at A&M's schedule, the rest of the way, A&M might be the best team in the SEC. Or they might at least get to that championship game in the SEC.
They're in that conversation for sure, given their record and the way that they've beaten teams as led by their defense and defensive improvement over the course of these games. Yeah.
So you find yourself, I think, if you're a fan of the team, wondering what is the game plan now? Do we go back to Wigman? Is it, again, one of these deals where we're going to play two quarterbacks? There's going to be a package for Marcel Reed. His ability to step in a relief effort.
Yes.
And dominate LSU was incredible.
It really was. And look, it's at home for Texas A&M, but the atmosphere was foreboding, right? The vibes were down when LSU was up, 17-7. Garrett Nussmeier making big throws. LSU receivers, was it Aaron Anderson who had the long catch and run? Like, there was a lot going right for LSU. They showed the clips of, like, guys getting into it with each other, pregame, the LSU and A, and like things were getting chippy from
very pedantic. It seemed, seemed very pedantic. Like I was expecting either a full blown fight or
there was aggressive nudges.
Yeah, it was very strange.
There was Garrett Nussmeier sort of taunting A&M players into personal foul. Like there was all sorts of stuff happening, and the A&M defense got filthy, Ty. Over the course of this game. They got physical. They were hitting. They got bigger and angry over the course of this game. And you're right about Marcel Reed. That comes in with his legs, with his arm, not as much perhaps as his legs, but just the general mood of this A&M offense lifted so much when he got in there. Connor Wegman was struggling with accuracy and decision-making. And I don't know what Marcel Reed's ceiling is as a thrower, as somebody who can lead this team against teams like Texas at the end of the year, that defense, the Georgia defense, if they play. Like, I don't know. But he seems to move the ball in the correct direction more often. And so, to me, if he has more reps with the ones in practice, if Colin Klein can say, okay, this is the new shape of our offense when we have Marcel Reed and as the season goes on, they become pretty scary. I mean, they are pretty scary. They continue to be pretty scary. Down 17-7, they win this game, 38-23?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. That's a pretty nice night if you're an Aggie.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if Brian Kelly had no answer.
Almost.
They had no answer when he came in. I mean, they just didn't. They couldn't stop him. They didn't know how to stop him. It looked like BK was ready to pull his hair out.
Yeah.
On the sidelines. And the same is true to some extent, I would say, with the Penn State-Wisconsin game, which, by the way, yours truly nailed the final score of 28-13.
Is that true?
It's 100% true. I went back and I checked my document.
And you were like, call me crazy. I could see Drew Aller getting hurt right before halftime, and there's going to be Beau Pribula, a little spark off the bench. Yeah, that's what you said in the preview. Continue.
Drew Aller did injure something. Mm-hmm. Some sort of lower leg injury now, as I guess we refer to it in college football, which kind of drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a knee tweak. I don't know if it was ankle. James Franklin, I think we know by now, will not tell us what it is because he's prickly about these sorts of things. But whatever it was, Drew didn't come back in the game, and that meant it was Beau time. It was time for Penn State's version of Dr. Beau. It was, in effect, Trace McSorley 2.0.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of crazy thinking this as I was watching Beau Pribula just move the ball at will out there with this offense. But I started genuinely having thoughts like, should this guy be the starter? And I don't think he's got near the ceiling of Drew Aller. And I almost feel dirty even thinking it. But there was definitely a shift when he came in, their ability to use all of the running backs kind of in tandem, play off that read option that he runs pretty well. He threw the ball pretty well. I have seen other instances of Beau Pribula where he does not throw the ball nearly as well, but they had this defense on skates. This defense, much like the LSU defense, I'm talking about Wisconsin here, was not prepared for Pribula to come in and have that kind of impact. They were prepared for him to come in at moments, a package down by the goal line if you need a 3rd and 1, that type of thing, but certainly not to play the entirety of the second half. He was really good. He looked really good. He was in command. It just kept, much like the A&M thing, just kind of kept humming. It felt like momentum was entirely at their back. And again, Penn State ends up getting a W, road spot in Madison. Now they go next week into Ohio State, which of course we'll preview on Thursday, but a big road win, and he was able to help change their fortunes.
Yeah, on the other side, Wisconsin's offense, I don't know what you do at this point. It doesn't seem like a passing game will exist against a quality team in the near future for Wisconsin. As much as they move the ball in a balanced way, I believe, against Rutgers and Purdue, and to a lesser extent Northwestern, they scored 20-plus points. That counts as something. Against a quality defense. And if you look at what Penn State fans do not love Tom Allen. They don't love him that much, especially early on in games when teams are able to like come out and execute a game plan with not a ton of resistance. You saw it against USC. Yep. Obviously, you saw it earlier in the season against a team like Bowling Green. And Wisconsin was able to move the ball with some success early. And that's another team that seems to get stronger as the game goes on, bringing a little bit more pressure in the second half. But Wisconsin, there has to be an off-season retreat to one of the thousands of lakes in the great state of Wisconsin to say, what are we doing on offense? Who are the quarterbacks we need to be recruiting? What types of offensive linemen should we be recruiting? How much money are we throwing at receivers in the portal? Are we running 5 tight end sets? What are we doing? What is the actual vision for this offense? Because you bring in Phil Longo, who had all sorts of success in a couple different places. They don't have the receivers to be wide open. They have good running back play here and there. The offensive line play is uneven over the course of the season, and it'd be cool if Braden Locke worked out. It doesn't seem like he's working out. He didn't obviously win the starting job for this team, and so I think there's a lot of inward searching that needs to be done with Wisconsin because it's just not happening against these quality teams.
Well, the irony is that he did have guys open in this game, and
drops and
he had guys open. He was horrible.
I try not to use language like that, but
these throws were, well, let's just call it what it is. He was horrible in this game. There were moments in this game where I jotted down in our note sheet that he forgot to do the firmware update.
Right.
He was glitching. Really bad. One hop Charlie's airmailing it.
But airmailing 6-yard outs. Yeah.
It was really bad. The interception, the pick six that he threw that kind of swung momentum in favor of Penn State.
Yeah.
I don't know how, they're wearing white, literally all white in the middle of the field. He threw
not
it right
close
to him.
Yeah.
So maybe he's not the dude, right? Clearly, I think he's kind of made that case that he's not the dude, but given circumstances, he has to be. I think you're right. There needs to be some sort of soul searching going on. If you're Luke Fickell and that offensive staff, it may not be the year this year, but at some point we got to figure out what we're doing here.
Or did Desmond Ridder make this guy's entire career? Yeah. I hope not, because I still am a believer in Luke Fickell, because I think this defense is improving and should turn into one of the Big Ten's better defenses. But and look, this is a backup quarterback. It was a backup quarterback last year. It was a backup quarterback this year. It's a tough watch.
It's a really tough watch. Yeah. But all due credit to Penn State. Penn State changed its game plan. They did it out of necessity. It'll be interesting to see what they look like next week, because it wasn't just Allard denied. Dennis Sutton was out for a good chunk of the second half. They also had a lineman get hurt. So at this point in the season, it's going to be week 10. Everybody's a bit nicked up.
I like, by the way, that you're maybe Beau Pribula is the guy. Who's next for Penn State? Congratulations, Beau Pribula. You might be the guy, maybe if Drew Allar's injured, especially. Ohio State.
Yeah, I don't like those odds,
yeah,
frankly, of Beau Pribula going against that defense. And I still think Drew Allar's the guy, but the ease with which he helped move the ball down the field with this offense, I'm only a simple man.
I hear you.
Can't
You know who's
help
not
but
the guy?
ask that question if this is a team that you care about.
You know who's I was going to say, not the guy for Penn State. Anybody in that receiver room. Not pass catcher. Tyler Warren is the guy, for sure. He is the offensive weapon, or at least was after the USC game, and I still think has the highest ceiling of anybody who can catch the ball or do whatever with the ball on this team. There's no receivers. I tweeted out, where are all these 5'10 dudes? Where's KJ Hamler? Where's Jahan Dotson? Where are all these dudes? I know Taylor Stubblefield's not the receivers coach anymore. Can't find a guy in Virginia? You can't find a guy in Metro Detroit? What's going on, Penn State? I was so entertained for so long. Entertain me some more, please.
Look, I'm with you. And I don't know if it was the threat of the run that opened things up down the field, but we saw Harrison Wallace get more involved, Liam Clifford get a little bit more involved. But yeah, right. I mean, Julian Fleming has basically been anonymous this season. He's had a couple good catches, had a really bad drop this game.
Yeah.
But all things considered, that remains the question, just as it was at the start of the year. Penn State wins, by the way, 28-13.
Yeah, we're sitting here picking apart Penn State. They were down for a chunk of this game and slowly paced their way to a comfortable win.
Before we talk about more escapes, because we do want to talk about Kansas State and SMU, why don't we talk about some teams that did not have to pull any kind of escape act?
Ooh, sure.
Let's talk about your Oregon Ducks, who won in resounding fashion at home over Illinois. We could talk about BYU going on the road as a dog.
Man.
And just taking it to UCF and what that means. We can talk about Notre Dame wrecking Navy.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about Bama blanking Mizzou and what that meant. There were a bunch of teams that are highly ranked this week that did sort of assert their dominance. And we don't want to make this all just a dunk contest here. Why don't we talk about some of those? So start with Oregon, because we previewed the Oregon game. It was a ranked matchup. I don't think either one of us was too sold on Illinois coming into this game. We had some expectations that maybe they'd find a way to muddy it up, but we didn't think the offense was there to go toe-to-toe with Oregon. What version of Oregon, what version of Illinois did we see?
I mean, I think Illinois is a decent team, but I don't think decent cuts it against number one team in the country right now with how they're playing, especially in that first half. Oregon came out and absolutely shelled them both on the ground and in the air. They weren't ripping off huge plays on the ground, but it's 3rd and 3. They're picking up 6, right? The drives are just going and going, and then Dylan Gabriel would find Patrick Herbert or Tez Johnson or Jordan James out of the backfield, Kenyon Sadiq. Like the ball was just being spread around really nicely, and Oregon just kept driving down the field and scoring, and then putting a ton of pressure on Luke Altmaier and getting punts, eventual turnovers. Like it was a lopsided game. The second half felt a little bit, I don't know, it was 35-3, I think. Second half felt a little bit pointless. Like Oregon was in a weird gray area between, should we be playing backups? Let's get another touchdown. Our Dylan Gabriel's going through the receiving options a little bit slowly as progressions and throws a pick that was not great with the corner peeling off. And so Oregon was just sort of sluggish in the second half, but I mean, the entirety of the second half was garbage time. When you're up 35-3 at halftime, Oregon did a really nice job. Got, the defensive line still without Jordan Birch. Did a great job. They have Michigan this coming week, who, nice little bounce back week for Michigan, by the way, against Michigan State. We'll get there. But no, that was the case with Oregon. I mean, if we're going to do a sidebar here, I was telling you, like, man, what a boring situation Oregon has for me to have to watch all, like, Oregon, Maryland, Oregon, Michigan State, Oregon, Illinois. Can we just have Oregon, Washington State? Can we just have Oregon, Cal? Can we have Oregon, Stanford, Oregon, Arizona State?
The answer is no, Dan.
I know the answer is no, but like,
get over it.
Autzen, like the student section emptied out before like the shout between the 3rd and 4th quarter. Like, this is just not a resonating. I know, poor number one team in the country, Ty. I know, but it just feels off to me.
Well, we're gonna be in Ann Arbor next week for that Michigan game. And so for those who are watching this live, it will definitely be a more abridged version of our Week 10 recap episode. We will do our best to put something out for everybody who I know is very active in the chat and care about the midnight stream. So we'll do something. We're still figuring out exactly what that is. It may not be as all-encompassing as a show like this. But Oregon at Michigan really is kind of the big one, I guess, left on the schedule the rest of the way. After that, it's Maryland. They play that one in Eugene. It's a long trip for Maryland. They should win that one.
Wisconsin's interesting, but we just talked about Wisconsin.
We just talked about Wisconsin. I don't think they've got what it takes to go toe-to-toe. They close out against Washington, which, okay, kind of a rivalry in the Pacific Northwest, but still, given the state of Washington right now, I feel like I like Oregon a whole lot more. I'm looking at my projection sheet now. They're a healthy favorite in that game, 2-3 score favorite in that game. So for all intents and purposes, Oregon, barring any kind of catastrophe, should be able to pencil its way into that Big Ten championship game.
Against what, Minnesota? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're
Minnesota
thinking? Now that Minnesota's dropping half a hundo, Ty. It's a new era.
Minnesota looked really good this week.
I think Minnesota against Maryland. It's Maryland, whatever. Maryland beat USC. Minnesota may have outscored themselves in their final 3 games from last year tonight.
They look really good. They look really good.
Yeah, nice even performance. Continue.
In that Maryland game, Maryland a week after knocking off USC. We thought there might be some letdown potential. There was. Notre Dame wrecked Navy, Dan.
Yes.
We saw this coming. Did you tell me that Klatt picked Navy outright?
I think so. And let's be clear. With regularity, I pick games confidently incorrect.
Yeah, we did it 10 times this past week.
But this Navy Notre Dame game, it didn't keep me up at night. Navy didn't have the defense, and they hadn't played a team like Notre Dame, and Notre Dame defensive players just hit Navy harder than they were used to being hit these first few games. It's different.
Here's what I would tell people.
Yeah.
We look at 40, 50 odd games a week.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the kind of thing that we're talking about on the preview, we're looking at the numbers, we're looking at the teams, we're looking just for points of interest, right? So we know all of these as they're coming up. We pay attention to this stuff. The Notre Dame Navy game, Dan, truly, as we look at our spreadsheets, that was one that jumped out to me as this is a huge mismatch.
You just look at the size of the defensive players that Navy has played this year with your eyes. Yeah.
Huge mismatch on paper. They don't play the games on paper, but
no.
All the data that we had at our disposal, it looked like a huge mismatch. This is the 4th straight game that Notre Dame scored at least 30 points. Their offense continues, I think, to get better. What was uncharacteristic in this game for Navy, and that could be because they were going up against maybe the better defense, the best defense they've seen all season. Notre Dame forced 6 turnovers, 5 of which were fumbles. Navy hadn't lost a fumble at all this season coming into this game.
Right.
So to lose 5 in one game, it's, Navy's coach talked about this in the post game a little bit, saying, well, maybe playing this one in MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford in the middle of this undefeated season was a little too much for us. We played a little bit outside ourselves here, but by and large, it was still Notre Dame was better in every facet. 6 turnovers will do that to you. Notre Dame scored 27 points off those turnovers. So not a whole lot for me to take away other than to just reiterate the trend line for Notre Dame is definitely pointed up and to the right, at least from an offensive standpoint.
It just seemed every play for Notre Dame was positive in some way. That Riley Leonard was ripping off like 8 yards a carry. Jeremiah Love was ripping off 8 yards a carry. By the way, on the other side, I think it was relatively early on. Blake Horvath, who I think was limited hand-wise, he had a bum thumb coming into this game. Sensational touchdown run from midfield. 50, 60 yards out, weaving in and out of Notre Dame. He just needed to do it 15 more times for Navy to have a chance in this one. So, as we started, right before we started, I said Notre Dame, one of the best wins of the season, one of the worst losses of the season. And that, I guess, is the Ty Hildenbrandt experience sometimes.
The best of times, the worst of times.
Yeah.
If I were a BYU fan right now,
yes,
I would not be sending us comments akin to, do you believe in BYU yet?
Right.
You going to pick BYU next week?
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say for not picking them this week?
Who do they have next week?
Et cetera, et cetera. Hold on.
Baltimore Ravens? Okay.
Let me finish.
Okay.
There are teams like this every year where you and I are unconvinced. TCU, most recently, went to a national championship. We weren't convinced of TCU all year. Sometimes the occult forces of the verballerhood are ever in your favor. And so if I'm a BYU fan right now, I'm not asking for any of those things. I am saying, Ty and Dan, please keep doubting us.
Right.
Please keep genuinely saying, please keep doubting us. Because every time we express any sort of concern about a matchup, as we did in this one, okay, they're traveling to UCF. UCF, it seems like maybe they're trending a little bit better, even though
Big
they
pop
keep losing.
explosion plays, against Iowa State. Yep.
Look great against Iowa State, even though they lost that game. Please keep doubting us, because whatever we're doing, I used to do this to my own team, frankly, the reverse jinx, it's working. It's really working. BYU was friggin' dominant, Dan. They were dominant. They were really good.
They were really, really good. Jake Retzlaff's really good. Spreads the ball around. Runs really well. Had a great touchdown run. Saw that. I appreciate, me personally, I've known you for some time now, that you have both doubted BYU and are taking credit for BYU all in the same breath. That is some classic verbal.
Well, I'm not taking credit for anything, but I'm just saying.
No, you're saying the occult forces of you not believing in BYU is singularly responsible.
You don't either.
Oh, I picked against them, but every time I watch them, I'm like, oh, they're good. And then I pick against them because I think it's a tough situational play, and I'm wrong. And I'm happy to be wrong if I get to watch good football as a result of it.
So BYU goes into an off week now. Okay.
Yes.
But after that, they've got the Holy War on the road at Utah. Utah lost, by the way, to Houston. 17-14.
Down bad.
Really down bad. I don't have much hope that Utah, talk about the story of the year, kind of on the other side of things, with Utah just bottoming out the way that they have.
Mm-hmm.
They're not winning the Big 12. They're not going to be anywhere close to winning the Big 12.
But
right now they're a 4-4 team.
But what do you do with these rivalry spots?
You throw the records out. I know.
You got to throw them out.
But coming out of that bye week, Holy War against Utah.
Yeah.
Home game against Kansas. On the road at Arizona State. Arizona State's plucky.
They're fun. Yeah.
They're fun. Close out the year against Houston. Is it time to talk to our kids realistically now?
Hold on. You're talking about Utah or BYU?
No, BYU.
Oh, yeah.
Realistically, 12-0 BYU.
What would you be most concerned about if you were a BYU human? A BYU-man?
Maybe that Arizona State game.
Where is that game being played?
It's at ASU.
Is there a kickoff time?
Not yet.
Okay. I agree with that. I think that's a pretty dangerous spot. But
on the road at Utah's a rivalry, and rivalries are always weird. We know this. I don't. With the way that BYU has been trending as of late, the fact that they've got a bye before that Utah game, they might not cover the spread, but who gives a damn? You just want to win that rivalry game. I'm looking at that Utah game. That doesn't frighten me at all the way it did at the start of the year. Not even close. Kansas is having a rough year. Kansas is 2-6. Could have beaten K-State. Definitely illustrated the point that rivalries can be strange. But still, games at home, I like their odds.
I
It's
agree.
that road game against Arizona State, man. That's the one that I guess if there's going to be weirdness, that's probably the game I point to. But it's, if you're a BYU-man, is that what you said?
BYU-man, yeah.
Keep doubting us and look at the schedule, and you got to feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, you have to feel good about it. And look, here's the other thing, Ty, just big picture. If they are as good as you say they can be the rest of the year, even if they lose to Arizona State, they could still obviously win the Big 12, end up in the Big 12 championship game. Playoff-wise, and I'm not talking about looking ahead of everything to say, oh, who could they play against? Just in terms of a visual, we could be getting December 20th in Provo. That's a nice little vista, Ty, in the winter. Winter college football in the mountains up high. That's pretty good.
There are only two teams in the Big 12 right now that are unbeaten in conference. One of them is BYU. The other is Iowa State.
Yeah.
Kansas State had its own survival act.
They did.
29-27, needed a late field goal to upend their rival, Kansas, in the Sunflower Showdown. K-State is 4-1 in conference. And currently, at time of recording, both Cincinnati and Colorado are playing. They're both one-loss teams within the Big 12. Colorado was winning. at present.
What's the score right now?
Colorado's, I don't know what the score is.
I saw it was maybe 24-14 the last I checked. Okay.
So it stands to reason that after this week, we're going to have a clear amount of separation, banding going on within that conference, and we will know kind of who the contenders are. We're going to have a pretty good sense for it as we turn the page, go into November next week. How do you feel about K-State?
Well, I feel good because they played in a rivalry game and they pulled it out despite making a ton of mistakes. I thought the way they ended that game, especially on defense, were like, just send dudes at Jalen Daniels. That they just can't keep up with this pass rush and sending pressure, and they were forcing Jalen Daniels to scramble and throw on the dead run or try to pick up extra yardage, and then you had a big fumble at the end that Kansas State turned into a long, well, you said it was a 50-plus yard field goal, I believe.
51-yarder, yeah.
With under a couple minutes left. Avery Johnson wasn't perfect, but the best of Avery Johnson was, again, quite impressive. It seemed like Kansas State was in position at least a couple times in the last few minutes of this game, Kansas, to just win it, to just stomp that. Whether it's a 4-minute offense, whether it's just picking up key first downs, they couldn't get out of their own way. The nice thing about Kansas State, you asked how I feel about Kansas State. I really like that they won at Colorado in terms of potential tiebreakers in this next 4 or 5 weeks. I think that could be quite meaningful.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very interesting conference. We've been saying it the whole way through that for my money, the most interesting conference. It is.
Okay.
And maybe the SEC has a claim to that title given some of the new storylines that have emerged there. But the Big 12 and where that is headed, it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to end up coming down to like the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. And that's going to make it a lot of fun for us to watch and talk about here on the show. Yeah. So Kansas State was one team that did pull a survival act. Another one was SMU. SMU needed a failed 2-point conversion in overtime to remain unbeaten in the ACC and knock off Duke. Duke put a hell of a game out there, man. 28-27 was the final. Really good game for Malik Murphy. And SMU struggled. SMU had 3 picks from Kevin Jennings. Definitely was not their cleanest game in the world, but didn't cover 11.5. Did end up winning the game here. Survive and advance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how great it was. Penkel, the receiver for Duke, who caught he was the go-to dude. He is the go-to dude. Caught the overtime touchdown, and they go for 2 and don't get it. It wasn't a ton downfield for Malik Murphy and Duke. How hard is it to turn the ball over 6 times and win a game on the road against a pretty good team? I don't know how many times that has ever happened. I don't think Duke had a single turnover.
No.
This was loading the bases every inning and being shut out. The runners left in scoring position for Duke, because you look at what happened with Duke drives after they were able to turn the ball over. It was like, Duke picked off Kevin Jennings and punted it. Duke picked off Kevin Jennings and missed a field goal. Duke recovered a fumble and turned it over on downs. And it's a very difficult thing that SMU was able to do in winning this game. But the defense came up big. The team was led by its defense, and win your clunkers, and SMU won an all-time clunker against Duke tonight. Crazy impressive for SMU to stay alive in this ACC race.
Yeah, go on out to merch.solidverbal.com and pick up a Win Your Clunker shirt.
Look at you, Ty.
You have to listen, I'm a pro's pro.
Pro move.
Here's the other thing. I'm going to reiterate this point. Much of the discussion next week is going to be about Ohio State, Penn State. It's the biggest game of the weekend.
Okay.
There will definitely be, at least on this show, a fair amount of discussion about Oregon, Michigan, because we're going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
The game that is not going to get enough attention is Pitt against SMU. The game's at SMU.
Yeah.
That game has real, true, monstrous significance in the ACC race.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to see what the point spread looks like. I have not even thought about who's going to be favored in that game. But that, to me, looks like a hell of a game that is going to have a ton riding on it with respect to who stands to maybe pick up the torch if somebody like Miami drops it with one of their road games down the stretch. I don't think it'll be Clemson. that stumbles. I think if anyone stumbles, it'll be Miami. Miami probably would have something to say about that after destroying their rival, Florida State, earlier today as well. But just saying, there's a lot riding on that game, and people need to pay attention to it, start thinking about it. We'll definitely put it as one of our pick'em selections on Run the Board. That to me, for my money, might be like the second biggest game next weekend.
By the way, you just keep saying the word pick. It's a real tough time to be a little too pick prone for Kevin Jennings against Pitt coming up, who 3 pick sixes in the first half Thursday night.
All by linebackers.
It was 5 picks total, yes, for Kyle McCord. Pitt's a good team. You gift Pitt 3 touchdowns on defense. They're a pretty difficult team to knock off.
I mean, if you look at the box score beyond those 5 interceptions.
No, I watched the game. Yeah.
If you didn't watch the game, if you just look at the box score, the stats do not sing anything Pitt, right? It was truly a function of they scored 21 points via turnovers. They got 2 more turnovers. Field position was very much in their favor.
No, they game genied this, Ty.
I mean, it was like a total hack.
Yeah.
And the game came off the swivel pretty quickly for Syracuse. Syracuse is not that bad of a team. Obviously,
no, they had the worst night of the year.
This was like their absolute clunker that we saw on display, and Pitt just sort of all they needed to do was not screw it up, and they didn't.
Well, and it's especially bad because there weren't. I mean, it was this, and was Liberty Thursday or Friday? Liberty Kennesaw was obviously ahead of Saturday. Liberty was Thursday.
Yeah.
There were a few games Thursday, Friday. Everybody's watching, right? This is peeing your pants during the homecoming king dance, the prom court. I was not a homecoming king, Ty, like you, so excuse me.
Yeah, okay. I'm doing a podcast. Believe me, I wasn't homecoming king.
No, it's everybody watching. It's everybody watching it in slow motion, and it's their worst night. They'll bounce back. They'll be okay.
So we'll see what Pitt looks like next week. They probably won't get 5 interceptions off of Kevin Jennings. He did throw 3.
He threw 3 tonight, 6 total turnovers.
So perhaps they'll learn something. That is meaningful, I think, for our purposes here. You mentioned the Kennesaw thing. I'll bring that up.
Please.
Because that was sort of the biggest upset of the year so far, if you can believe it. Kennesaw State, a newcomer to the FBS ranks, squares off against Liberty, who was undefeated, who had some playoff aspirations. I don't know how real those were given strength of schedule, but Liberty was in the conversation.
You can't lose to arguably one of the 7 worst teams in FBS football. Yeah.
Liberty came into this game about a 4-touchdown favorite. I think it was 27 at close.
Ooh.
They end up losing this game to Kennesaw State. It's Kennesaw State's first win at the FBS level.
Yeah.
It's almost unprecedented that this would happen in the manner that it did.
Was that Kennesaw? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's all. I don't know.
But still, you wouldn't expect Liberty's going to drop a game like this.
No, it was real ugly, too, on Liberty's behalf. Yeah.
Very, very ugly game.
On their part, yeah.
Almost as if they didn't take it seriously. So
almost as if.
That's another one that will have some playoff implications, at least in the G5 level. We have some G5 thoughts.
Well, no. It's not even implications. It's a conclusion. Liberty's not going to the playoff.
Liberty's not going to the playoff.
No.
The one team we have not talked about is Alabama.
Yes, correct. We have not.
And this game against Mizzou. So Brady Cook gave it a go. Brady Cook hurt his ankle pretty badly a week ago. One of those deals again where he went to the hospital during the game, got the MRI, came back, got some stray looks from people who were out in the parking lot, like, let's see what's going on here. Ends up going back in the game. They get a hard-fought win against Auburn. Fast forward to this week. He tries to give it a go. First off, even before he got hurt again, it wasn't really working. But he's out there. He ends up hurting his hand. Drew Pine comes in. At that point, it feels like game over. Drew Pine was not good. Drew Pine has never been good. This is me talking as a scorned Notre Dame fan.
Right.
ended up throwing for like 60 some odd yards, had 3 picks in this game. He was not going to elevate Mizzou to the point where they could beat Alabama. I guess my question to you is, did we learn anything from Alabama in this game, or was this just total system failure on behalf of Mizzou because of their own circumstances with their offense?
Well, I mean, with regard to where the headspace was last week of Alabama fans after losing to Tennessee, we learned that it was a nice weekend for Alabama fans. It was a nice day for Alabama, especially on defense, to beat up on a wounded team. And so, no, I don't know if we learned anything necessarily new, especially with how Mizzou struggled against A&M on the road a few weeks ago. But I only watched a little bit of this game. And here's my editor's note. Drew Pine, whatever you want to say about him, beat Clemson. Drew Pine was good enough to beat Clemson. That's my editor's hat right now is, we should also mention in audio italics, good enough to beat Clemson. But yeah, it was not going to happen with Mizzou's struggles this year, Mizzou's inconsistencies generating bigger plays on offense. You need to be able to do that against an Alabama defense that is tough to me. And how you get Alabama is by getting after the Alabama offense, making Jalen Milroe see things that aren't there, turning them one-dimensional into Jalen Milroe doing everything with his legs and his arm, targeting Ryan Williams as many times as humanly possible instead of spreading it around and giving the defense different looks. And Mizzou's not built for that this year. They're just not, especially not when they're giving the ball back. I mean, he threw 3 picks, Drew Pine, against Alabama.
No.
Yeah, it just got uglier and uglier and uglier. Good win for Alabama. Mizzou 2024 is not Mizzou 2023.
No, I mean, and it's been one of the, I think, disappointing storylines this year.
Agree.
Mizzou, because of the expectations. They had a lot back. It just doesn't seem like the offense has given them the same pop as it did a year ago. Maybe losing Cody Schrader had more of an impact than people had thought coming in. I don't know what the actual cause for it is. We can unpack that at some point in the future. The SEC race, though, now by virtue of what we saw happen in Week 9, looks something like this. We've got one team undefeated in conference. That's your Texas A&M Aggies, Dan.
Yeah, my team. Yep.
5-0. We've got 4 teams with 1 loss. Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and LSU.
And let's see. Georgia plays Tennessee for sure. Yes.
Yep.
Texas will play A&M.
Yep.
Who else does A&M have? A&M has South Carolina, I believe, on the road this coming week. That is a letdown. It's not a look ahead, but is a letdown spot of letdown spot. Like, it is.
Of epic proportion.
I agree.
We will talk about that one for sure.
Correct.
Of course. But with the fact that some of these teams do play each other, LSU stands to...
they've only lost once, right?
LSU only has 1 loss, but LSU stands play a team like an Alabama, which could be an interesting game, right? Coming up here.
Totally.
So there's, I think, a fair amount of upward mobility for some of these teams that are kind of in that next tier down. That should go without saying in the SEC, where everybody always beats everybody. But right now, if you're an A&M fan, you got to feel pretty good about where you stand. It's probably beyond your wildest dreams at this point that you'd be atop the conference, especially the expanded conference now with Texas in it, right? It's sort of like an incredible fairy tale with Mike Elko taking over, with there being some turnover, and yet the way things have fallen, you're 5-0 in conference, 7-1 overall.
By the way, just because you're mentioning the teams with the fewest losses in the SEC does not mean that Vandy does not have 2 top 10 opponents to finish out the year and might have a little something to do with how the final standings shake out in Tennessee and LSU. Woo! Can't wait.
A few other things here, Dan. We have been going through our top 12 lists, items that we have jotted down that
please
jumped out to us this week. The Boise State story continues to be very, very interesting.
Yes.
That game on Friday night against UNLV was a barn burner.
It was. I only watched some of it so far. I will do more of it on the Tuesday show. Continue.
Really, really good game. High-level game. Enjoyed it thoroughly. Ashton Ginty with the go-ahead touchdown late in that one to ultimately give Boise the win. But 2 teams that I think probably end up meeting again for the Mountain West title, and I'll look forward to that matchup. I think Boise is in control now of that G5 playoff spot, especially with Navy taking a loss, with Liberty taking a loss. Tulane maybe trying to find its way back into this thing, but they've got 2 losses.
They got the 2 losses. Good law. I mean, it's Oklahoma and Kansas State.
They would absolutely need to win their conference, and they would need to do so going away.
Right.
But for where I'm seeing it, I think it's Boise. I also think Army's
still there. Yeah.
Army's got an interesting case here. There's a pretty good chance that it's going to be Army with 1 loss after Notre Dame versus Navy with 1 loss for that American title.
Right.
It could happen. I do think the Navy road is harder. They do have to play Tulane down the stretch here.
Mm-hmm.
But it stands to reason that Army also is going to be part of that conversation. I stand by what I've said. I can't envision Boise being left out because of Ashton Ginty. Provided they don't lose, I can't imagine the committee would want to leave a superstar like that out of the playoff.
Who, by the way, was not a huge factor in terms of production, obviously a huge factor in terms of attention and gravity, and UNLV's entire game plan was focused on stopping Ashton Ginty. He never really got loose consistently, to the credit of Barry Odom and this UNLV defense, but they were unable to get a ton going consistently on their own offense. And so Maddox Madsen made plays, and really, really impressive win on the road. I was just distracted because Freddie Freeman was ripping the heart out of Yankee fans everywhere Friday.
How dare you?
I was distracted. 2 up, 2-0, Ty. Ba-na-na.
Let's read some tweets, all right? Let's read some tweets.
Roll. Play.
If I'm not me, who the hell am I?
We put a weekly call out across all of our socials asking, hey, who are you a fan of and how are you feeling right now?
That's
Had
right.
a bunch of those come in. I'll actually start because I'm going to role play a little bit and say if I were a Virginia Tech fan, I'd be really happy with the way my defense played today.
Yes.
It was sort of a, how shall I put it, inconsistent offensive effort from the Hokies today, but it was a really good showing against Georgia Tech, holding them to 6 points. Granted, not the same Georgia Tech without Haynes King, but this is a win that I think Virginia Tech fans needed. So if I'm a Virginia Tech fan, I feel pretty good about the state of the defense.
I mean, if I'm an Indiana fan, keep it going, because Taven Jackson wasn't always all that great, I would say. A lot of real short stuff, a lot of pickleball-y. Justice Ellison he ran hard. He didn't open up a ton, but the defense got after it against Washington. I'm thrilled if I'm an Indiana fan and I'm looking around the sport, seeing how other backup quarterbacks fared on Saturday. I'm thrilled to get out of that with added attention. What, game day was in town?
No.
I know Lee Corso was there. It was a great performance from Indiana, all things considered, without Curtis Rourke. I'm thrilled.
If we're going to keep plugging away here and we're going to read some of these,
yes.
On the topic of Indiana, real quick,
please.
How does Indiana stack up against Ohio State, realistically?
After today or before today?
If we assume that Curtis Rourke is going to be back.
No, I know. I'm saying, but like now that we have more information
after today,
the vulnerability of Ohio State up front on offense, and perhaps some
games at Ohio State.
Games at Ohio State. Okay, Ohio State will not be as frustrating every week as they were this week, but they might be as beat up on that offensive line for a while. So how do they stack up? I think Curtis Rourke and Indiana beat today's specific version of Ohio State.
Wow.
I do. Okay. That's today.
Just wondering.
This was Ohio State's worst day of the season. Now, an average day for Indiana against an average day for Ohio State, I think Ohio State's better. I think they win that game by 10 to 13 points.
If I'm a Louisville fan, I'm proud of how the team came back and knocked off Boston College.
Yeah.
21 unanswered in the final 18 minutes is pretty cool. Take that. If I'm a Florida State fan, I'm just like beside myself. They're 1-7 at this point after getting
how many points they finished the game with against Miami? 7?
Yeah, just not.
They scored that early, right?
Not a good showing. It was a really bad game. If I'm a Rutgers fan, I wonder what's happened to my defense.
Yeah.
because the defense has really bottomed out these last couple weeks. So I'm a Minnesota fan, which I am. It is still bros before nose, my friend. 320, 4 touchdowns for Minnesota. Superstar Max Brosmer. And this was kind of the performance you were waiting for.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Brosmer. It was Darius Taylor. It was Daniel Jackson. Those three, the big three, as we call it here at Minnesota headquarters. They were behind the 48-point output from that Minnesota offense. So I would feel pretty good about that.
Definitely.
Any thoughts from our Verballerhood, Dan?
Oh, my God. Virginia fan, infuriated.
Yeah.
I agree with that. That was North Carolina getting right against Virginia today.
Yeah.
Iowa fan feeling like, are we getting better or is Northwestern just that bad? Two things can be true.
Yes.
And you did it with benching Cade McNamara for Brendan Sullivan.
Yep.
I believe. Northwestern transfer.
Yep.
That's a pretty good. I mean, winning is good. Winning is always good. Iowa State fan, and I'm thankful it's a bye week. I think that's a great point of view.
Yep.
I'm a Baylor fan, and I'm feeling like Dave finally binged episodes of Fixer Upper. Baylor, by the way.
Are they back from the dead?
I think Baylor and TCU both got a little bit spicier today. TCU pulled out a weird one. Baylor has an offense. If Baylor finishes that Colorado game, we're talking about Baylor 27 minutes ago. Just in terms of what their record is and the way that they were able to kind of pace Oklahoma State today. I mean, at least the Baylor offense going at the Oklahoma State defense, because Alan Bowman and Brendan Presley, I mean, that's kind of all it's the only situation, it's the only receiver he kind of looks at, Alan Bowman, for better or worse. But Brendan Presley was great. Baylor woke up. Or not Baylor woke up, but Baylor keeps it going. And you look at the rest of Baylor's schedule, and you can pull it up, Ty. It's pretty great. If they're scoring 40 a game, it's pretty great.
They do have an offense.
They have an offense.
They absolutely have an offense. The rest of the way, it's TCU. You mentioned. Got TCU next week. Then they go into a bye. Close out the year at West Virginia, at Houston, home against Kansas.
AJ's a Michigan fan, wondering where this offense has been all year. Okay, so they run. They call a really successful trick play. And Davis Warren, while not incredible, completes passes for first downs. And he did that before. He went like 11 of 14 in his start against, what it was the early start. It was 3 picks. His 3 incompletions were 3 picks. Who was that against?
I don't have it in front of me.
It wasn't Fresno. It wasn't Arkansas State.
Too late for me to recall this, Dan. You know.
I know. I understand. But he is the quarterback that gives them the best chance to complete passes downfield. And in a very losable spot to Michigan State, who started out that game quite successfully. Michigan stayed with it. I think Michigan's defense is maybe above average in this moment, and that's okay because that's good enough to beat Michigan State. They're able to move the ball. A nice win at home in front of a home crowd.
24-17 was a really nice win.
Yes. We got a lot of BYU people here. Ohio State fan, alarmed. Tennessee fan, feeling thankful that only the Yankees are making me miserable this evening as I could not handle the double misery. Yeah. Ty, I got to introduce you to Tommy Edman. He is just... Yeah, he's Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, and Ted Williams, all in a tiny, tiny little package. I'm a Texas Tech fan, and I'm feeling like we're a 5-3 team that might not hit 6 wins. That is not a great feeling.
No, that's not good at all.
The slow bleed. So, Baron Morton injured in this one, and TCU pulling them out. Not always pretty, but TCU, winning record, going to go bowling. Pretty decent. I don't know. I didn't watch a ton of this game. Excited to watch it Sunday or Monday.
The only thing that I'll close the segment out with is saying if I am a fan of Group of 5 football, the MAC is pretty damn awesome right now. The MAC looks great. So we had the Bowling Green Toledo rivalry, which there were a ton of points in.
You almost picked the winner of that game, by the way. You had one of 2 teams to pick.
Yeah, 41-26, Bowling Green. Your Bowling Green Falcons knocked off Toledo. Nice win for Bowling Green. Bowling Green obviously has taken teams like A&M and Penn State to the wire. So was probably foolish of me to not pick them.
Well, they're better on the road, too. Yeah.
Better on the road. But Bowling Green with a nice win. We had Western Michigan knocking off Kent State. That in and of itself isn't really that big of a surprise. Kent State is not a very good team. However, Western is undefeated and now alone atop the back.
Yes.
And weeknight action to decide their fate is going to occur over the next few weeks. Just kind of file that away. Ball State knocked off NIU, talking about the worst loss of the year for Notre Dame, right? Yeah. NIU's defense collapsed after a field goal to take the lead with like 15 seconds to go. They allow a 34-yard pass that lets Ball State into field goal range. 5 of NIU's 8 games this season have been one-score games. So Tom Hammock, different guy, has definitely had his season on eggshells. And to close things out here.
By the way, did you hear? Here's just like a little sidebar here. During the Notre Dame, I guess you weren't watching the Notre Dame game super closely today because you were in and out and watched it after the fact. It was revealed that Marcus Freeman shows Notre Dame the NIU game before every game in the least chill thing. Like, Coach, we know it was a bad Saturday. We were there. We know it's not going to happen again. And he was like, guess what we're watching?
Yeah.
We're watching Homeward Bound again. You know, he just every single Saturday they're watching the NIU game. Man, that's tough beat.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Exactly.
That's the way this works, right? All right. Thank you to everybody for writing in. We did have a bunch of Dude Alert suggestions, if that's something that you'd be interested in.
Oh, my God, of course.
Who'd the Verballer Hood send in today?
Jackson Corville, if I got that right, for Ball State. 4 of 5 from 47, 50, and 52. Kickers, man.
Kickers and monsters.
Mackay Hughes, Tulane, went for nearly 200 on the ground, and that, I guess it was a shootout win over North Texas, covering by half a point. Talon Green, by the way, should point out, I know there are like popular weight loss drugs that people are taking in 2024. If you truly want to lose weight and stick to a program, play offense for Arkansas when they play against Mississippi State. You will have so many calories gone from your life. Everybody got exercise for Arkansas against Mississippi State today. So Talon Green, 6 touchdowns, almost 400 total yards. Cam Lockridge at Fresno, 7 tackles, 2 picks. Chandler Morris, as mentioned, North Texas, in a losing effort. Cooper Lega for Tulsa, a crazy comeback against UTSA. Legs and arms for Lega. Fernando Mendoza, Cal, absolutely obliterated Oregon State. Jarquez Hunter went for 278. Did I see that number correctly?
And
didn't watch much of this.
They beat Kentucky.
The elite loser, Hugh Freeze, was a winner, so got to give him credit there. Braylon Russell, the running back for Arkansas, went off. Dawson Pendergrass on the ground for Baylor and through the air a little bit, I believe. Coleman Owen for Ohio went off, and Roderick Daniels. It wasn't all bad for SMU on offense with the turnovers. He was great as a weapon through the air for the Mustangs. So those are your dudes.
There are 2 other dudes that need to be mentioned here, Dan.
Please do.
They do play for the BYU Fighting Cougars.
Oh, okay.
One is holder Sam Vanderhaar. The other is kicker Will Farron.
It was a wild fake field goal, yes?
I have never seen this version of a fake field goal in my life. So to reiterate, we have seen the play. It is burned into college football lore. The fake field goal of the holder taking the snap, no look, tossing it back over his head.
Of course.
To the kicker, who is sort of running what amounts to a pitch play.
Yeah.
Who goes around the end, seemingly to get a first down or a touchdown. We've seen this before. LSU did it very famously. What I have not seen happen is what Sam Vanderhaar did in this BYU game, which is instead of throwing it back over his head, instead almost acting like he fumbled the snap, then springing his legs up and snapping the ball back to the kicker as he is running around.
2 snaps. 2 snaps, 1 play.
It was 2 snaps. It was 1 play. It was a successful fake field goal that went for, I think, about 8 yards and a first down for BYU.
Mm-hmm.
When it's working, it's really working. Again, occult forces of the Verballer Hood here with BYU.
And I think the kicker had the opportunity to throw it on the play as well and just chose to run it. Yeah.
He did. So it was a fake field goal that kind of looked like a fake field goal, was definitely a planned endeavor.
Yes. Yeah. And technically,
That doesn't just happen because you're trying to make no. It was a deliberate snap back between his legs to the kicker who ran for a first down, did have the option to throw. I have never seen, if anybody has seen another play like this, send me the YouTube clip. Send me a still image. I have never seen anything like that. I would love to meet the person that put that together.
Somebody will do a story on the behind the scenes of that fake field goal. And it almost feels like the money quote from that story will be, we tried it in practice. It went horrendously bad. It didn't work. It got snuffed out immediately, but we figured, why the hell not? Let's try it in a game.
My thought after seeing it was, is that something that the holder just wanted to do as a flex?
Right.
I feel like the holder makes that call if he's going to go for it or not. It's like when the gymnast is up on the balance beam and you could go for the higher impact move and decide against it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if he was Sam Vanderhaar, if you're listening, right, in solidverbal@gmail.com.
Yeah. If you're going to do something, do it right. Do it with some flair.
I want to know if you had like a choice route there where you could either go between the legs or just go with the standard flip over the back of the head.
Right. Would love to know. They executed it perfectly.
Dan, that does it for our Week 9 recap episode. Hope everybody enjoyed this. It has been a long day of college football. We are going to go and do our spillover episode on Tuesday. So anything we didn't talk about, anything we need to unpack more, things that we think about a little bit more and want to discuss, we will do that on Tuesday. Don't forget to hit follow. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. If you've already done that, tell a friend, leave a review. All that stuff helps more people find us. Again, just as a reminder to the crowd out there that is watching this live, that stops by every Saturday night at midnight Eastern to watch this live, we will be in Ann Arbor, Michigan, watching the Michigan-Oregon game a week from tonight. We will have something in this place. We're not exactly sure what. We're still working on that.
There will be a Saturday night recap show of some kind next Saturday that will be here. And if you are tailgating at the Michigan-Oregon game, let us know. I don't know if there's anything you want to take advantage of listeners for beyond tailgate opportunities, Ty. Is there anything else that you need?
No.
Do you need like a shiatsu massage of some kind to work out some of your knots? Anything?
Outside of Michigan Stadium? No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, fair enough. But yes.
Tailgating will do just fine.
We'd love to say hi. We're very excited to go to Ann Arbor. It is the first time that we are actually attending a game in quite some time. We've gone to national championship games and made stuff before games and then left for the actual game. So excited to tailgate, wander around. It should be quite good.
Yeah, and we went to Northwestern Duke back in week 2.
We did.
But we're talking real stadiums here. Real stadiums that aren't portable and, have a little bit more history behind them. Yeah.
The fake stadium taking some strays here from Ty Hildenbrandt at Northwestern on the leg. That's a great
They're
stadium.
not even playing there anymore.
I know. They're at Wrigley now. Yeah, holler. We're going to be in Ann Arbor. Come say hi some way, somehow.
Week 9 officially in the books. Looks like Colorado, barring any kind of great comeback, will emerge victorious here. We could talk about that on Tuesday. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, thank you for downloading, for listening, for supporting. We will talk to you all soon. Stay safe.
Peace.